Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the weight of an entire life built on values you believe to be unshakable. Justice, kindness, courage. People look at you and say you are the kind of man who never bends, who always does what is right. But what if, suddenly, what's right becomes impossible? The war changed everything. The streets are silent, fear occupies every corner, and the distant sound of sirens no longer frightens it, only announces that the world is about to crumble once again. You feel your heart race, the air getting heavier, the cold of the metal in your trembling hands. Before you, a uniform, the symbol that represents everything you despise. That uniform that has taken lives, destroyed families, erased entire histories. And yet, now, it's there, waiting for you. Wearing that uniform might save those you love, your wife, your children, your parents. But it could also destroy everything you believed you were. What would you do? The sound of your breath mixes with the slow beats of your heart. Every second feels like a judgment. Between survival and conscience, between instinct and morality, you realize, good, when pressed, also bleeds. In the next 20 minutes, you will discover how good can be tested to its limit, and how, amidst the chaos, it is the small decisions silent, almost invisible, that reveal who you truly are. But it could also destroy everything you believed you were. What would you do? The sound of your breath mixes with the slow beats of your heart. Every second feels like a judgment. Between survival and conscience, between instinct and morality, you realize, good, when pressed, also bleeds. In the next 20 minutes, you will discover how good can be tested to its limit, and how, amidst the chaos, it is the small decisions silent, almost invisible, that reveal who you truly are. Germany, 1939. The streets smell of coal and obedience. You are just a child, but you have already learned to raise your arm in front of the flag and repeat words you don't yet understand. At school, the teacher talks about purity, duty, and honor. The radio echoes speeches that promise a glorious future as long as the enemy is defeated. And everyone believes. Your parents, your friends, even you. After all, how can you doubt what everyone calls the truth? But here is the first trap. What you think is right is not always what is true. Sometimes it is only what the world around you has decided to believe. The sound of military marches fills the mornings. Children's laughter blends with the sound of hymns. Until, suddenly, the laughter stops. The war begins, and everything changes. The enemy is no longer a distant idea. He gains a face, a name, and fear. The streets, once full of parades, now hold rubble and silence. The sirens cut through the air. The city, once proud, now smells of smoke and regret. The wardrobe door creaks. Inside, the uniform hangs like a symbol of everything he swore he would never be. His breath is heavy. His heart races. Outside, the war consumes everything. Neighbors disappear. Families are taken. Fear has become routine. Now, his own family is at risk. A man knocks at the door and says, "If you wear the uniform, they live." The choice seems simple, but it's not. Because it's not just a uniform. It's a silent pact. Every button fastened, every emblem sewn, carries an invisible weight, the weight of the actions to come. The instinct to protect collides with the moral duty to resist. And, for a moment, right and wrong blur. He looks at the mirror. The reflection shows a soldier, but inside, he is still a son, a brother, a man trying to survive without losing his soul. Between good and evil, only fear remains, and the decision that will define who he truly is. Not all evil is born from hatred. Sometimes, it's born from obedience, from the will to survive, from believing that following orders is the same as doing what's right. Now he wears the uniform. The fabric feels as heavy as iron. The emblem stitched to his arm seems to pulse with his heartbeat, a constant reminder that each step takes him further from who he once was. The sound of boots hitting the ground echoes. To the left, soldiers march with discipline. To the right, chaos consumes the world, children crying, families fleeing, cities in ashes. The same uniform that grants him protection is what brings terror to the eyes of those who see it. He tries to convince himself, "I'm just doing my duty. I'm saving my family." But inside, something begins to crack. With every order followed without question, a part of his conscience goes silent. With every lie told to cover a mistake, the truth loses its strength. And here lies the invisible dilemma, the point where good and evil stop being opposites and start to blend. You don't notice when you cross the line. No one does. A small step, an easy decision, hey, I had no choice. And before you realize it, you're already on the other side. Most people think ethics is theory, but true ethics is measured in action. Silence. The character's face, once firm, now carries doubt. He sees civilians being taken, orders being given, and yet, he remains still. The sound of heartbeats grows louder. Breathing becomes noise. Each echo symbolizes a choice, a concession, a piece of good traded for the comfort of inaction. The screen splits again. On the left, he follows orders. On the right, the consequences of those orders. A painful, human contrast. Because evil rarely begins with bad intentions, it begins with the silence of someone who once believed they were doing the right thing. Amid the chaos, stories emerge that defy any simple logic of right and wrong. While some close their doors to protect themselves, others open them even knowing it could cost their lives. A woman keeps silent as she hides a Jewish child beneath the floorboards. Each step the soldier takes above her is a contained prayer. Outside, the neighbor watches, hesitates, and decides not to tell. That small, invisible decision saves a life. But there are other stories. Ordinary men, fathers, who obeyed orders without question. It's just my job, they said. If I don't do it, someone else will. They didn't pull the trigger out of hatred, but out of fear. And fear, repeated enough times, turns into complicity. The same act that saves a life can condemn another, and that is the complexity of morality in times of war. Visual. The screen splits on one side, hands helping, on the other, hands shackling. The contrast is suffocating. Every decision, every silence, every averted gaze, carries weight. The character observes everything around him, the soldier who shares a piece of bread with a prisoner, another who strikes him out of pity. He realizes that purity is impossible in that world, that morality there is a minefield. And then it hits him. There is no right or wrong button. There are only choices, and every one of them comes with a price. An act of courage can cost a life. An act of obedience can cost a soul. The sound of war fades, leaving only the beating of his own heart, the sound of the weight of deciding. And in the silence, he understands. No one leaves a war unscathed. Some lose their bodies, others lose what once made them human. The silence after the war is the loudest of all. There are no bombs, no screams, only the echo of one's own memories. Wearing the uniform was not just a decision, it became a scar that never fades. The character looks at himself in the mirror. The uniform is no longer there, yet he still feels its weight on his shoulders. His hands tremble, not from the cold, but from the memory of what they touched, the orders carried out, the moments of silence, the times he could have acted and didn't. Did I do enough? He wonders. Or deep down, was I complicit in the evil I swore to fight? His voice is low, hoarse, almost a whisper, as if confessing to a ghost. Visual. Close up on red eyes, shallow breathing, the shadow cast upon the wall, a shadow larger, heavier than his body itself. Each memory returns as a fragment, a scream, a look, a gunshot. He realizes that the war has ended on the outside, but inside, it still rages on. This is the truth few are willing to face. Extreme choices don't just change history, they shape the soul of those who make them. The character falls to his knees, without tears. Because guilt, sometimes, isn't cried, it's carried. And in that silent weight, good and evil cease to be mere concepts, and become scars engraved upon the conscience. There are mistakes almost everyone makes when looking at stories like this, and the first is the most dangerous of all, believing that only those who wore the uniform are guilty. The truth is that guilt rarely has a face or a uniform. It spreads silently, through small decisions, through the moments when someone chooses to stay quiet, to avoid getting involved. Many never pulled a trigger, yet helped keep the system standing, simply by not questioning it. The second mistake is thinking that evil begins in grand ways. It doesn't start with gunfire or orders, it begins with subtle concessions, just this once, it's not my problem. And before you realize it, those small concessions pile up until they become something much bigger, something impossible to control. That's how ordinary people lose themselves, believing they're merely following the rules. And the third mistake is believing all of this is in the past. Because the moral dilemma isn't exclusive to war, it lives on today, disguised as routine, as hierarchy, as fear of standing out. It happens when you see something wrong at work and pretend you didn't. When someone is humiliated and you think, better not get involved. It's in those moments that the line between good and evil is drawn again. The uniform changes. The era changes. But the conflict between conscience and obedience remains, and all of us are still being tested. If you were in this character's shoes, the world around you would split into two paths, both dark, both with consequences. The first path is obedience, the path of apparent safety. You do as you're told, avoid trouble, protect those you love. You convince yourself, you have no choice, that you're just another piece in something bigger, but with every order accepted, without question, a part of you fades, the conscience grows silent, the soul adjusts. And silence begins to feel like virtue. The second path is conscience, the path of deliberate choice, even when it hurts. It's the path of those who pause for a moment and ask, is this right, or just convenient? It's the path of those who understand that physical survival isn't worth the price of integrity. But walking this path comes with a cost. It might mean losing what you love most, it might mean standing alone, and yet, it's the only path that preserves what makes you human. Because ethics isn't about being a hero. It isn't about grand gestures. It's about recognizing when an order violates what is right. It's about doubting, questioning, resisting even when no one else does. Ethics is a constant choice, a silent dialogue between who you are and what the world tries to force you to become. And in the end, the real test doesn't come when it's easy to do what's right, but when doing what's right could cost you everything. Think before you act. Question before you obey. Because one day, history will change its setting, but the dilemma will remain the same. And when that moment comes, the question will be, did you follow orders, or did you follow your conscience? The lesson that remains for you today is simple and uncomfortable. In the coming days, ask yourself, where have you already worn a moral uniform? At what moment did you choose silence when you should have spoken? In what situation did you give in to others out of fear of being judged? Or worse, at what point did you convince yourself that you had no choice? These are the small wars we all fight. And the battlefield now is your routine. At work, when something unjust happens and you pretend you didn't see it. In relationships, when you avoid telling the truth to keep the comfort. In society, when you choose not to question because everyone else is doing the same. The challenge is simple. For 7 days, observe your decisions. Just one per day. Ask yourself, am I choosing what's right or what's easier? Maybe it's a small gesture telling the truth, admitting a mistake, defending someone in silence. But these small choices build character. And character is what remains when everything else crumbles. Because, in the end, goodness isn't proven in speeches or flags. It's proven in practice. In the moment when you choose to keep your conscience clean, even when no one is watching. If you want to understand more about how human morality is tested and what makes some people resist while others corrupt, the next step is in the link below. Understanding choices is learning to be human. And true learning begins when you look inward and have the courage to answer, who would I be if the world put me to the test? The final sound is silence, a close-up on the character's eyes. And slowly, everything fades, leaving only the question echoing in the mind of those who listen.